Hello everyone, I am Pranjali Kumbhar working as an assistant professor at Rajarshi Shahu Mahavidyalaya Autonomous Latur. Today in this video we will learn about ecosystem and its types. So let's start. The ecosystem. The ecosystem means what? The interaction between the organism and their environment is known as ecosystem, or the system which is resulted due to the constant interaction between the living organism and non-living things is known as ecosystem, or it consists of plants, animals and microorganisms in an area and functioning together with all physical and chemical factors of the environment. Okay, means what? The ecosystem means the interaction between the organism with its environment. It's called as ecosystem. Then what is ecosystem? The ecosystem is the structural and functional unit of ecology where the living organisms are interact with each other and with its surrounding environment. Okay, the word ecosystem, which is first coined by scientist A.G. Tansley, an English botanist in 1935. The ecosystem is the structural and functional unit of ecology. But first of all, we have to know that what is ecology. The term ecology, which is coined by scientist Ritter in 1885, and the word ecology, which is derived from two Greek words. What are these two Greek words? That is oikos and logos. What is oikos? Oikos meaning house, habitation, or the place of living. It is also called as the dwelling place. Dwelling place means what? The living place of that particular organism. And what is logos? It means to study. Then the definition of ecology is the study of the interrelationship between the living organism and their environment. It's called as ecology. Okay, and that environment include the physical environment as well as biological environment. And that physical environment, which include light, water, temperature, wind, gases and atmosphere. And in that gases, the gases like CO2, that is carbon dioxide, then oxygen, nitrogen, that all gases are included in that atmosphere or the physical environment. Then biological environment, which includes the organism of all kind, that is plants as well as animals. Next, we will see the structure of ecosystem. It's the structure of ecosystem, the different components which are present in the ecosystem that are decided the structure of ecosystem. And that structure or that components are the biotic component and abiotic component. Then what is biotic component and what is abiotic component? Let's study. The ecosystem which divided into or which having two components, that is abiotic component and biotic component. What is abiotic component? The non-living factor of ecosystem. For example, light, temperature, soil, water. Okay. Next, the biotic component or the biotic factor of ecosystem means the living factor or the living component of ecosystem. For example, producer, consumer and decomposers. Okay, and that producers are the plants. The consumer means consumers are again divided into three types, that is primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. Primary consumer means the herbivorous organism is called as primary consumer. Secondary consumer means what? Those which are depend upon the primary consumer, and tertiary consumer means those organisms which are depend upon the secondary consumer. Okay, and next, decomposers, these are also consumers, but the way of consumption is different. That is, they having absorptive mode of nutrition. Absorptive mode means what? They obtain their food material by absorbing. What they absorb? They absorb the food nutrient from dead and decay matter. Dead and decay matter, they absorb the food material from dead and decay matter. Biotic component and abiotic component means the living component of ecosystem called as biotic component, that is producer, consumer and decomposers. And abiotic component means what? The non-living component of ecosystem is known as abiotic component, that is light, air, water, temperature and soil. Okay, next, the biotic component we see one by one. That is, first biotic component is what? Producer. What is producer? The producers are the organism that are able to produce their own food. by using the process photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? Photosynthesis is a process in which the plant or the plant parts or the leaf which use water or the root the roots which are absorbed water, that absorbed water is used by the plant, and with the help of sunlight and the carbon dioxide which is present in atmosphere, they use all these raw materials and it prepare the food, and which is stored in the form of starch. Okay, and that process is called as photosynthesis. Means what? The plants which convert the light energy into the chemical energy and stored in the form of food. Okay, that organisms are called as the producers. Means what? They do not depend upon other organism for food. They prepare or they produce their own organic food by using photosynthesis. They do not depend upon any other organism. Okay, that organisms are called as producers, that is autotrophs. Autotrophs means they do not depend upon other organism. For example, plants, algae or some bacteria. These organisms having chlorophyll molecules or the chlorophyll pigment in their parts, so they prepare their own food. That chlorophyll molecule which absorb the light energy, and that light energy is converted into the chemical energy. Next, the consumers. It is also the biotic factor. That consumers are called as the heterotrophs. What is heterotrophs? The organism which depends upon the other organism for food, as they depend upon plants or the other animals, and they obtain the food material, that are called as the consumers. And that consumers, for example, animals, fungus, proteins and most of the bacteria. The types of consumers are again divided into three types, that is primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. The primary consumers are those organisms which are totally or which are directly depend upon the producer. Those organisms are called as the producers. Means that organisms are also called as the herbivores. Means they do not eat any other organism. They just depend upon only producer, that is plants. Okay, that organisms are called as the primary consumer. Okay, next, secondary consumer. The organism which are depend upon the primary consumer, that organisms are called as the secondary consumer. Example of that primary consumer is what? Rabbit. Okay, and the secondary consumer which depend upon the primary consumer for its for the food. And what is tertiary consumer? Tertiary consumers are the organism which are depend upon secondary consumer. The secondary consumers are also called as carnivores, that is the carnivores of the first order. Carnivores of first order. Carnivores means what? The organism which depends upon flesh of other organism. And the carnivores or the secondary consumer which are depend upon the other organism, that is primary consumers, means they are the flesh eating organism, and that flesh eating organism is called as carnivores. And this is the first order of carnivores, hence it is called as the carnivores of first order. Next, tertiary consumer. Tertiary consumer means what? Which are depend upon secondary consumer, and it is the first order. Then the tertiary consumer means it is also called as carnivores of second order or the consumers of the third order. Okay. Next, the decomposers. The organism or the microorganism which decomposes the dead parts of the plant and the animals are known as decomposers. Decomposers means these are also the consumers, but the way of consumption is different. That is, they absorb the food material from the dead and decay part of the plant or animal. For example, worms, mushroom, insects or bacteria. These all are the microorganisms which are also known as the decomposers. Means they decomposes the organic part and obtain their food material, called as decomposers. Means what? They convert the complex organic substances into their simple form. These are called as the decomposers. Next, we see the types of ecosystem. There are mainly two types of ecosystem, that is natural ecosystem and artificial or man-made ecosystem. Then what is natural ecosystem and what is artificial ecosystem? Natural ecosystem means the ecosystem which is developed naturally, that ecosystem is called as natural ecosystem. Okay, and that natural ecosystem which is again divided into two types, that is terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. The terrestrial ecosystem means the ecosystem which is developed on the land. Okay, that ecosystem is called as terrestrial ecosystem. Example of the terrestrial ecosystem is forest, grassland and desert ecosystem. Then next example or next type of natural ecosystem is aquatic ecosystem. The ecosystem which is found in water called as aquatic ecosystem, and that aquatic ecosystem is again divided into two types, that is marine water ecosystem and freshwater ecosystem. The water which having large concentration of salt is called as marine water, means that water having extreme amount of salt, that water is called as marine water. And when the ecosystem which is present in that marine water called as marine water ecosystem. Next, the fresh water. What is fresh water? The water which having appropriate amount of salt, that water is called as fresh water. Okay, and that freshwater ecosystem which is again divided into two types, that is lotic water ecosystem and lentic water ecosystem. The lotic water means the flowing water, that water is called as the lotic water. And what is lentic water? The stagnant water. Okay, that stagnant water is called as lentic water. Means what is lotic water ecosystem? The ecosystem which is present in the lotic water called as the lotic water ecosystem. For example, river, stream or spring. That river, stream and spring. And lentic water, the example of lentic or the stagnant water is lake, pond or swamp. That water is called as the lentic water, means the stagnant water. The types of ecosystem, that is main two types, that is natural, artificial. Natural ecosystem again divided into two types, that is terrestrial and aquatic. Terrestrial ecosystem means found on land. Okay, aquatic ecosystem which is found in water, and that terrestrial ecosystem again divided into forest ecosystem. Okay, next grassland ecosystem, in which number of grasses are present, that ecosystem called as grassland ecosystem. Next, the desert ecosystem, and the aquatic ecosystem which is divided into freshwater and marine water ecosystem. Freshwater which is again divided into two types, that is lotic and lentic. Lotic water means what? The water of river, stream or spring, and the lentic water means the water of lake, pond or swamp. Component of ecosystem. Okay, component of ecosystem are of two types, that is biotic component and abiotic component. Biotic component means what? Living component of ecosystem, and abiotic component means what? Non-living component. This terrestrial ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, forest, grassland, desert, freshwater or lentic or lotic water ecosystem, these all ecosystems are having these two components, that is biotic component and abiotic component. That biotic component and abiotic components are interact with each other and it will form the ecosystem, that is terrestrial or aquatic ecosystem called as the terrestrial ecosystem or aquatic ecosystem. Next, we will see the one by one, that is forest ecosystem, and next aquatic ecosystem. Example, pond ecosystem. First one is the forest ecosystem. What is forest ecosystem? The ecosystem which is found in the forest called as the forest ecosystem. Means the forest ecosystem is an ecosystem of forest and resources, and that forest ecosystem which includes two components, that is, or the two factors, that is biotic factor and abiotic factor. What is biotic factors or the biotic component of ecosystem? The producers, then consumers, that is primary consumers, secondary consumers and the decomposers. These are the biotic component of ecosystem. Firstly, we see the what is forest ecosystem, the ecosystem which is developed in forest called as forest ecosystem, and that forest are formed by the plants, the group of the plants which is structurally defined by their trees, shrubs, herbs, climbers and ground covers. What is forest? The definition of forest is the land or the area where the tree species are dominant. That area or that land is called as the forest. Okay, and where the ecosystem which occurs or the biotic component which interact with each other in the forest, that ecosystem is called as forest ecosystem. We'll see the components of ecosystem or component of forest ecosystem. That is, first one is producers. What is producers? The producers can synthesize their own food by the photosynthesis process, means all green plants which are found in the forest, that plants are called as the producers. Okay, means what? They use light energy and convert them into the chemical energy and stored in the form of food. That organisms are called as producers, or where it also called as autotrophs. Next, consumers. Consumer means the organism which are depend upon other organism called as consumer. First one is primary consumer. What is primary consumer? The consumers which do not prepare their own food and they depend upon the producers, means they directly depend upon the plants. That organisms are called as the primary consumers, means they are also called as the plant eating organism. That organism are called as the primary consumer. For example, grasshopper and deer. Next, secondary consumer, the consumers which are depend, or the secondary consumer which depend upon the primary consumer or which draw their food or they obtain their food from primary consumer called as the secondary consumer. Next, decomposers. The decomposers are the organism which decomposes the dead and decay part of the plant or animal and obtain their food or the nutrient. That organisms are called as the decomposers. For example, microorganism. In that microorganism, bacteria, fungus or any other insects are included. Next, pond ecosystem. The pond ecosystem which also include the two factors or the two component, that is biotic component and abiotic component. The biotic component of pond ecosystem is what? Producers, consumers and decomposers. Producers means they do not depend upon other organisms. They obtain their food or they prepare their own food by using sunlight or water or the carbon dioxide which is present in the atmosphere. That organism are called as producers of pond ecosystem. Okay, for example, algae or the phytoplanktons, that organisms are the producers. Okay, next the consumers which do not which depend upon the other organism, that organisms are called as consumers. Then again the consumers are of three types, that is primary consumer, secondary consumer and tertiary consumer. What is primary consumer? Which depend upon or directly depend upon the phytoplanktons or the plants. That organism are called as primary consumer. For example, protozoa. Next, the secondary consumer which depend upon the primary consumer called as secondary consumer. For example, insect or the larva. Next, the tertiary consumer which includes the large fishes which depend upon the secondary consumer. That organisms are called as tertiary consumer. And the decomposers of pond ecosystem are bacteria, fungus or microbes. These decomposers which decomposes the dead parts of the plant or animal and they obtain their food, that organism are called as decomposers of pond ecosystem. In that forest ecosystem and pond ecosystem, the biotic and abiotic factors which interact with each other and they form the ecosystem, that ecosystem is called as forest ecosystem or pond ecosystem. Okay, and the abiotic component of pond ecosystem are what? Water, next light, temperature. By using these non-living things or the abiotic factors, the biotic factors, they prepare their own food or they obtain their own food and live their life, and it forms the pond ecosystem as well as forest ecosystem. Okay, thank you.